Jeff with Koncept Garage here, taking you behind the scenes for this 2-car garage renovation. This is also an Anderson Mill. This is actually the second garage that Olivia, who we did a reality show episode for, Detached Garage Dream. It's a 3-car garage, and a behind the scenes video of that project for. This is her second garage. So once we finished the first one, we moved on to the second one. Her goals for this garage were a Jeep top lift. She has a Jeep hardtop. She wanted it to be able to easily pull that top off. She wanted to blank slate everything. I agreed that was the best case here, because if you watch those other 2 videos we did, the previous homeowners were DIYers. This garage was no different than her other garage, where it was a hodgepodge and needed a lot of work. And then her pantry and laundry area inside the home aren't big enough, so she needed some space here for what we call household overflow, cleaning supplies, shoes, paper backstock, all the things that would normally go inside of a big pantry or laundry area, laundry closet. She doesn't have that inside, so we needed to provide her with some space. Here's what we walked into. I want to point out this. This is a storage closet that was added in after the home was actually built, but her Jeep was so big that she kind of had to pigeonhole it over here. You can just see how long and how little space she had, and then the edge of the storage closet here. Here's another shot. So you could see the condition. There's popcorn on the ceiling, and then this was knockdown texture, and the walls didn't have texture. Some of them were wood. Here's a good shot of the corner. So there's a hodgepodge of systems. You see the wood here. And then the electrical. I mean, there was no plumbing in here, thank God, because that other garage had a lot of plumbing we had to correct. But the electrical work in here was not up to code and needed a lot of help. Let's see. Here's the ceiling. So this is just drywall, really poor job taping. Whoever used this nail gun or hammer was just nailing things in way too hard. So a lot of divots, and then you see the popcorn ceiling here. So a lot of cosmetic work needed to happen. This is low voltage, obviously just strewn across the ceiling, not the cleanest we've ever seen. So we wanted to get that straightened up for her. And then you see this vent here. When I poked my head up in the attic, it was really interesting. The HVAC system for the home, they pulled a duct and to condition the garage, but the garage space was so big that what was happening is the garage isn't getting cooled or heated efficiently, right? That duct is just too small for that size of space. We weren't getting enough CFM into that space. And seeing the previous homeowner just pulled a new line over, it affected the heating and cooling inside the home. So now there's hot and cold spots. And when she told me that, I poked my head up there. And so the hot and cold spots were happening for 2 reasons. One, that HVAC system is maxed out based on the cubic feet it needs to condition. And then you add the garage in there, and suddenly, it's not able to condition all of the interior space effectively, because we've just added 500 square feet of garage space to the load that it needs to condition. That, and then these Flexiducts, there was so many pinch points. Like you could see one here on the rafter, so that's a pinch point. And then the way that whoever the tech put these in, it just looked like a roller coaster. So air wasn't traveling through some of these effectively. There was a lot of bottlenecks in the actual duct lines themselves. So I had our tech go up there, one, to fix this and to make this more efficient and get rid of these pinch points, and then second, to make sure that the hot and cold spots inside were addressed. And there was an issue with the thermostat. It was not programmable, so we changed the thermostat for her too. But you could see here the ceiling was insulated, and we ended up pulling all of the drywall off anyway, so we insulated the walls and gave her a truly conditioned space. So here's some of the photos. Once we started pulling the drywall off, you could see somebody cut a hole in a load-bearing stud to run electrical through. And the zigzags here, this just tells me that it was a DIY project, or the electrician that was in there really didn't give a damn about cleanliness. A lot of times in the attic we'll see this, like the sloppiest work usually is in the attic because people just assume, oh, nobody's going to look up here or give a hell. And then we go up there to plank everything out and have a lot of cleanup work to do. So here's some of the open walls. This is an exterior wall, so there's no insulation in it. The interior facing walls always have insulation in them. It's required. It's a building code. I want to show you the sub panel over here. Ooh, look at all this. It's a bit of a mess. So our electrician had fun cleaning this up and bringing it up to code. And then with the walls, there was drywall, there's wood paneling. It wasn't as bad as the other garage he has, but still it needed a lot of help. So we pulled it all out. This back wall here, on the other side is her laundry room. So you can see there's fiberglass insulation. Now fiberglass insulation over time will settle. The real value with the fiberglass, the way that it insulates is between the actual fibers, so those air gaps. When fiberglass insulation gets compressed or gravity pulls it down, it settles over time, the R value goes way down, and then you start having those drafty spots. We had a client who had interior space on the back side of their rear wall, and that was his office. And he complained to me. He said, "Jeff, in the summer that wall is really warm, and in the winter I'm really cold. I need a space heater." So we pulled that wall open, took out the fiberglass insulation, and did cellulose-based insulation, and that solved the problem for him. But when we pulled the ceiling down here, all of that insulation obviously came down with it. Let me show you what the insulation looked like once we were done. So when we do insulation, we do one of two things. If the drywall's there and we're not pulling it all out, we'll do what we call a drill and fill, meaning we drill holes in between the studs. It looks like chicken pox. They're 2-inch round holes, and then our partner will take cellulose-based insulation and blow it into the wall. There's fire blocking in between, so there's pieces of wood that section off this wall. So that's why we have to cut a handful of different holes in between each stud. The challenge with that is then we have a lot of drywall repairs to do and a lot of painting work. So sometimes people say, "Hey Jeff, I want to put a split system in. I want to condition it. I want to use it as a gym or give the teenagers a room to horse around in." That's fine. The real value of the insulation doesn't come from the financials. So when we're drilling and filling a wall, we have the extra painting and drywall repairs. We have the cost of the insulation. Now, the added cost of the split system is usually, if you ran a split system, 1.5 ton split system, like was in this space, 24/7, it'd add about $2 a day in Austin, Texas, to the electric bill. When you run the numbers, the payback on doing the insulation and all the painting and drywall is beyond 10 years. So if it's not a forever home, or somebody says, "Hey, we're going to be moving out of here in a couple of years," or whatever, usually we don't insulate these exterior walls because the split systems are so efficient. $2 a day, it's the numbers, the financial payback doesn't work. But when we're ripping apart a garage like this, it just makes sense because it doesn't add much cost. It adds a few $1,000s to fully insulate this space. We're redoing the drywall anyway and having to, tape and float and then texture and paint everything. So the added cost when we're replacing all the drywall isn't as extensive as if, the drywall were in place and we were just putting a fresh coat of paint on. So if you're considering insulating your garage, be sure that you run the financials, because the last thing I like hearing, and I just met with somebody in Georgetown, they said, "Hey, we went insulated doors. We hope that would help condition the space a little bit without doing a split system. We're thinking about insulating." Well, it turns out they just need a split system. They don't need the insulated doors because the heat transfer is only coming through those doors. At the end of the day, it's getting direct sun, and by that time, the garage is already baked. It's already warm. So In fact, the insulated doors then are just keeping that warm air trapped in there. Just by simply adding a split system, they could relieve all that. They didn't need insulated doors or insulation on the ceiling or walls. Let's see. Here's some shots of the drywall. We had to pull that attic ladder out and put a brand new one in. And you saw in one of the photos I showed you that there was overspray and popcorn on the piece of wood that sealed this up. Previously, she would have needed a ladder to go up here, but we put in, and we do this often, where we're swapping out these attic ladders or cutting these attic access holes bigger and then framing it out and putting an attic ladder in. So the ceiling, the attic space can be used as storage space. We can get the non-essential items, the building supplies, all that kind of stuff up in the attic very cost effectively, and then create more room to enjoy the garage or, walk around or use it for more essential items. So here's all the brand new drywall. Let's see. That's a good photo. One thing I want to point out about, and this is from the epoxy. So when you have verticals like this, we epoxy them. Some companies don't, we epoxy them. The challenge is with gravity because you're applying a wet clear coat, and sometimes epoxy is very much an art and a science. So there is a human art element here. Sometimes when the techs will apply clear coat to the verticals, gravity pulls it down if they put it on too heavy, and it will pool. So you see this, it looks like discoloration. This is just heavier clear coat, and it pools at the bottom of the verticals. Is this bad? No. It's just thicker clear coat, so the floor here is thicker. But it's something to be mindful of, because if you're epoxying the garage yourself or having a contractor do it, you don't want too much of this pooling because it will appear discolored. It's just thicker, it's more clear coat than over here. And then you could see the gray base coat underneath here with the flake blend. Now, we do a 100% coverage, but with the verticals, sometimes you do see little spots where that gray, whether it's gray or tan or black or white, solid epoxy base coat is pulling through. So that's another important element. If you choose a color blend and you don't know what base color the contractor is putting down, it may or may not match the manufacturer's sample that you chose that color blend off of. So just make sure and double check that. If it was a gray epoxy, make sure that the contractor is using gray epoxy instead of tan epoxy, or they're going to finish the job and you're going to think, man, this doesn't look like the color I selected. Well, that's why, because the base coat they used is a different color than the sample you chose your color off of from the manufacturer. And the last thing I'll say about the epoxy with this pooling, the floor needs to be non-porous. So if any of these paint chips on the floor are pulling up through the clear coat, i.e. these chips are not fully sealed in, the floor will stain. Dirt and oil and grease and just all that ick is going to pull into the flakes and stain the floor. The challenge when you have a fully non-porous floor and a really heavy top coat or several top coats, which we strive for, is it's like an ice skating rink. It's fully sealed in, no moisture is going through that floor. The chips aren't really giving that clear coat grip. So it's important that there's some kind of additive added in there, or that the chips themselves are a different size. Like if you go 1/8 inch instead of 1/4 inch with one clear coat, you'll have some grit and some grippiness to that floor. Otherwise, some kind of additive like a clear silica sand will give the floor some grip. So if it's not conditioned and the dew point's below the ambient temperature, there's not that layer of moisture that causes you to slip when you're just trying to get into or out of the car. Or when you pull the car in the garage and it's wet, you don't want to obviously slip falling into the house. That would not be good. So thicker floors are better, longer life, but with the non-porous factor, there needs to be some kind of an additive to prevent slippage. Okay, here's some of the after shots of this job. The Jeep top lifts, we like installing the motorized options instead of the pulley systems. When you have a pulley system, you have to cleat it to the wall here. And that just adds a bit of a safety issue. Now you've got a big rope basically cleated to the wall, and you've only got 2 screws holding that in from letting go. So it's a bit of a safety hazard. And then the ratio with the pulleys, oftentimes there's only 2 or 3 wheels, which really doesn't offset the weight of the Jeep top itself much. So they are still heavy when you're pulling that thing up and down. You could see here we got rid of that storage closet in the back, which opens up the space, makes it feel roomier. She chose the same color palette as the other garage, with the exception of the floor. We did a standard flake blend here, where we did a chipstone series, which it gives it more of an interior vibe. So when we're doing a conversion and the use case is a playroom or a gym, I like chipstone. The challenge, if you're pulling in and parking on a chipstone series blend, is there's not a lot of color variance in the flake blend, which means leaves and grass clippings and tire marks and just all that kind of debris is just going to show up a little easier. Here, the variance in the colors, it camouflages the dust and debris that kind of blows in, so it looks cleaner longer. This floor is still easy to clean. A cleaner can easily just take a wet mop across this. If you have an electric leaf blower, you just blow it out. So they're not challenging to clean. I spoke in another behind the scenes video about our design principles and how we like to use existing lines. This is another good example where we have these windows and then we size this slat wall to align with the existing lines. We're not creating new lines. Like if we came down a little further, one, there's really not much added value to put accessories down here. But secondly, it adds lines, so it looks a little more busy than clean lines like this, where we're just carrying one line across. Let's see. So remember I said at the beginning of the video she doesn't have a big mudroom and there's a lot of household overflow. Well, she doesn't want shoes in the house, so there's not enough space to store all the shoes they have. So we accessorize the slat wall near the door to the home to facilitate that with the shoe shelves. So yeah, here. So the transition into and out of the home is really seamless now. There's not a lot of pinch points. It's very easy to get into and out of the house. We call these grab and go setups to facilitate that transition. And then here's some before and afters. This is of the ceiling, the popcorn, the overspray. Just the wood trim rotting out here. And then our painter, they just did a very light texture. We replaced the lighting in there. We did a new light layout for her. Just 1x4 frosted lens. LED fixtures on off. We didn't need anything dramatic, recessed cans on a dimmer, because the use case here is as a garage. So you could see the transformation here. Then of the entry area. And then last, here's a couple of shots of that Jeep top lift. Sometimes she had a specific product in mind that she wanted us to install. You have to be careful because the rafter layout needs to be factored in. So if the product itself doesn't have adjustability for various rafter layouts, some wood blocking or some support is going to be needed by whoever installs it. So that's what these wood blocks are for, to compensate for the location of this lift and the rafter layout itself. There's a product that we use default that we don't need to block the ceiling out, but these smart lifts are great. App-based, they're motorized. We did have to add an outlet on the ceiling. Oftentimes there is an outlet on the ceiling because of the garage door opener. So based on where you actually want that lift installed, just make sure that that cord for the lift is long enough to reach that outlet on the ceiling. Otherwise, you're going to have an electrician drop an outlet. And if you don't have access above the ceiling, he's going to have to cut open your ceiling to pull 120 volts from your sub panel over to the ceiling, which then necessitates painting and drywall repair. So try and avoid that as much as possible. The motorized Jeep top lifts, usually if it's a manual system, you need 2 people, and these tops are heavy. They're not light, but with the motorized options, you only need one person, which is great. So if you don't have a partner, you could just put the hooks on the actual top itself, hit the button, and it pulls up. So makes it really easy. All Jeep top lifts are not created equal. Some of them are cheap, and then you go to install it and you realize, oh shoot, we need to block this out, or I need an electrician to drop an outlet, etc., etc. There are some really good ones in the marketplace that have been engineered to factor in that and keep the installation pretty seamless and the operation easy. The motors themselves you want to make sure that you get a Jeep top lift with a heavy duty motor that's high quality, because if that motor corrodes or fails, most garages are unconditioned spaces, so temperature humidity swings, it's more of an exterior space. You don't want that motor failing on you and having to go through warranty claims. So if you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our website, our Instagram too. Follow us on Instagram. We post a lot of great content there, and if we can be helpful, please let us know.